This is the Brella Community Services Podcast with Michael Morgan and Raj Sahota, talking about the I'm Still Me project, a support talk about dementia.
Welcome again to the Brella Podcast, and my co-host is Raj Sahota. Hi, Raj. How are you?
I'm good, Michael. How are you?
I'm having the time of my life. I didn't think, to be honest with you, when you originally came to me with Louise and you said, how would you like to do a podcast on dementia? I had my running shoes on and I was out the door, but it has turned out to be a remarkably transformative experience thanks to your hand-holding and Louise. And we've had some extraordinary guests, and today is absolutely no different. We'll get to introducing our guests, but I always like to start out by having you introduce yourself and tell people what you do, how you do it, and what does Brella do, and why is it important at this time?
Got it. My name is Raj Sahota. I am the manager of the Adult Day program in South Surrey, and I'm also the research and evaluation coordinator for the I'm Still Me project, which is funded through the Public Health Agency of Canada. And its primary goal is to raise awareness around dementia and destigmatize it. So Brella itself is a non-for-profit organization. We primarily run on grants and fundraising. So donations are always needed, greatly appreciated. We love it when things happen. It's really needed to help keep the good work that we're doing, keep that going.
Right. And you're out in the community, Raj. So you go and visit people. They can come and see you. They can have tea. They can find resources. So, as you pointed out, one in our broadcast always is one out of every 15 minutes. There's another diagnosis of dementia. So there's a flood of people who need some resources, and you're providing it in the community.
Yes. So it's something we are calling the Silver Tsunami, which is coming, and it is coming fast. We are providing resources for not only people that are living with dementia, but also their caregivers. So there is a wide variety of different programs that are offered, different respite options, caregiver support programs. We have social prescribing. We have the caregiver and dementia-friendly visitors. We have a telephone tree. Everything is pretty much run on grants and fundraising. So all the money is always super helpful. It's super needed. It's what we need to keep our services going strong out in the community and to expand it across BC and Canada.
All right. Well, that's excellent. I'd like to introduce our two guests, two extraordinary people. And we seem to have had nothing but extraordinary people in all of the podcasts we've done. But in particular, we have Dr. Michael Mandel and we have Joanna Gillespie. Not only are they a couple, but they're a professional couple. And I'd like to greet you both. Hello to you.
Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Let me tell you why I thought you would be so superb for this. Michael, you're a retired physician, and I wonder if you might just, for the basics for our audience, explain where did you graduate, what was your specialty, and a little bit about what you learned from that practice. And Joanna, we'll do the same with you right after Michael introduces his career.
Okay, well, I was trained in Australia. I guess from my accent, I gained it. And I went to a Jesuit school when I was a boy and graduated there at the age of 16, went into med school and at the University of Sydney in Australia, graduated and did a little bit of internship in Australia, but then felt that I should widen my scope with the encouragement of my parents and went to the US where I worked for a year and a half. And I was about to be drafted, so they got me into a job in Montreal at the University College, and I worked there for 4 years, and then decided I thought I should come home. But in the meantime, a good friend of mine who had gone to Denver, it's a bit long, and he said, "Why don't you come over to Denver? You can ski and have the fun of your life, which you won't be able to do in Australia." So I said, "Okay." And so I went to Denver and then went up to, I'm sorry, I'm getting it around. I went to Denver before I went to Montreal. And then saw the expo in Montreal, was much fun. And then stayed there, finished my master's degree, and then came west and ended up here in Vancouver.
And you practiced here for how long?
Been in practice since 1972 till 5 years ago. Oh, no,
No,
till 72.
no.
So 72.
2012.
2012.
We
Yeah.
retired in 2012.
2012. Joanna, you've had a wonderfully adventurous life. How did you get into the RN business and what drew you to it?
Well, I think it was driven, I was driven into the profession mainly because of my love of animals and people, and my parents really wanted me to be a nurse. So right out of high school, I entered nursing school in Victoria and finished the 3-year program, and then traveled to Vancouver and started nursing within the hospital. So I had a real wide range of experiences in nursing in the hospital. Then after about 20 years, I ended up looking after asthma patients and helping Michael do outreach clinics throughout the province and running some research projects. And it was really a lot of fun. And then he retired, so I followed him in retirement in 2012. And now I'm a retired nurse.
Why I wanted to have you on is because the theme of Brella has been and is dementia. And I wanted to ask two aspects. When you were younger and you were in the peak of your practice, how did you deal with people who came in ostensibly because of their allergies or their asthma, for which you were doing really seminal research at that time? How did you deal with the onset of dementia? Was there anything to be done? Did you notice it? Did you put it on their charts? How did you deal with that?
Well, at the time, it wasn't a major issue, actually. We were seeing adults of various ages. I was not a pediatric allergist. And so we did see some elderly people who had early dementia, but I didn't think at the time it was any great problem, except later in the practice, I guess, we had complicating issues. And when COVID came, it got even worse. And from there on, we can talk about that if you want.
For me,
I think, yeah.
it was
Go
my
ahead,
problem was that a lot of the elderly people couldn't follow the complicated program of taking all their medications. And that was the same when I worked in psychiatry. As they got older, following a regime of medication on a regular basis or taking pills on a regular basis was a real challenge. So my approach had always been simplify and write it down and make it as easy as possible. But some of them couldn't even manage the dexterity required to take the devices. So it from a nursing point of view, I think it was a challenge.
Yeah. Raj, do you run into that challenge when you're dealing with the folks and the people with dementia? Is that an issue still, this idea about
Yes.
following protocol?
Yes, it definitely is an issue still. We do have clients that come into the day program with blister packs, but even those are too difficult to open. So we have the LPN on site, which will help with the medications. We have certain clients that have automated medications that do the automated dispensation. So they come in a kind of like a special little electronic box. It's almost like a little safe box, and the timer goes off and their pills come out and it makes a little alarm noise and they take their pills. We have clients where home health services will actually come in and administrate their medications as well, because they're no longer able to take them in a timely manner, or they take them all at once, and that's extremely dangerous. So now we're finding that there are ways that are being used and it's being mitigated, but the ones that are still living at home or they're living at risk, it's still a little bit more difficult. So home health and Fraser Health have come a long way in working with the local pharmacies and doctors' offices, but there's still things that need to be done.
So in getting back to Michael and Joanna, one of the things I have to say as a caveat, and I've told Michael and Joanna this before, I am a lifelong asthmatic. I've had asthma since 7. And the work that you were doing, which I want you to touch on in the time that you were my specialist, I'm only here because of the skill of these two people, and I say that with no degree to flatter them, but I was a severe asthmatic, and they kept me alive. They kept me up on medicine. They changed medicines. They monitored in ways that nobody had done before. And I wonder if we could just briefly touch on what made that treatment so special. I remember you had machinery and you had data that nobody else had, and you developed it. And as part of that, I was able to keep on living till I am here.
Well, one of the things that was important from my point of view is that you had to give, as we just heard, patients a structure. And we actually, together with Joanna, had a printout called At2 Works. And that is a bit of a double-edged sword. But nevertheless, if people have a written program in front of them, what to do, it makes a huge difference. And on top of that, we gave them checkpoints when they should come and see us without an appointment necessarily. Just let us know. And we would see them, even though sometimes it was a bit inconvenient. But it's really important that patients who have respiratory disease, particularly asthma, you have to get onto the problems quickly. And for that reason, we wrote the emergency aspect into the schedule without them having to see a doctor. And that was a bit revolutionary at the time, but we didn't let them get along by themselves. We had hands-on, euphemistically, we had hands-on and would answer the phone, answer the questions, and they would say, well, what does this mean? And so on. So we had ongoing care, even though they weren't with us. I mean, weren't at the time. And then we had Joanna and her cohort of nurses to back that up.
So now here you are, retired now for a few years. And Michael, do I dare mention your age? I'd love to, but I don't want to.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
Why don't you mention your age?
85.
85 and still, and I guess why you're here is because Joanna, not everybody has an RN to look after them. I mean, it's pretty darn convenient. But I know you to be a bright, intelligent, curious, still viable human being with an incredible intellect. And Joanna has always been a spark of another. She comes from a light. So how do you govern this aging process so that people who are watching this would say, well, I want to be like those people? What advice can you give them on how to walk and navigate the aging process successfully?
Well, that's a multifaceted question. I think the first thing is outside specific medical intervention, patients have to have a good diet. And if they don't have a good diet, they are in trouble from the start. And we noticed that originally there was many problems related to diet, both directly and indirectly. And if they didn't eat properly, they would go to drugs. And drugs can sometimes be extremely harmful, particularly even if they're the right drugs, unless the schedule is given appropriately, they get into trouble. So it was a very major importance that we both corrected their diet, corrected their lifestyle if we could, and then give them At2 Works that they can take home with them, not just a scribbled out thing, which I would have to do, but something that was legible, reasonable, and applicable so that they would know what to do. And most importantly, know when to call for help. They were underlined, these instructions were underlined that it's important if you can't get better with the stuff we've given you and the instructions that we've given you, then come and see us, both over the telephone and in person. And that's critical. I think it was a critical thing. And it raised a few questions with MSP. How are you seeing these people so frequently, charging, da, 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 da. And they actually understood. And I think the data that we got proved it.
Can I
Joanna,
just,
you're now in charge of almost probably everything to do with the care and feeding of your brilliant doctor. What advice can you give people who may not have your skill, but they have someone 85, bright as a penny, but still things change when you get in your 80s? What can you say about that?
well, it's balance. I think as you get older, you're always adjusting. I adjust based on Michael's adjusting, so we're tied together. But I think it's a balanced lifestyle, and every day there's an adjustment to be made. So a little more napping, a little less walking, good eating, of course, as Michael mentioned, but exercise and activities. Of course, I'm running the dogs and doing all my exercises, and Michael is as active as he can be, but he needs more napping. I notice this now. It wasn't like this before, but now he gets more tired. So I have to adjust so that he has his time for the naps. And meanwhile, I run and do other things. So to keep our lives in harmony right now, there's always flexibility, adaptability. And I pick up on cues. Today's not a good day. Today's a day we take it quietly. Multitasking is out of the window. We don't do that because as you get older, your mind doesn't flex as quickly as it used to be even 5 years ago. So we do one major task a day and keep the rest of the day quiet. And it so far it's worked. I don't know how I would cope if I didn't have a nursing background, because I don't know if everybody is sensitive to these changes that one goes through as they age. But fortunately, maybe that's why I became a nurse, to help Michael through this adjustment time. But it is a balance. It's a constant balance and adjustment and tolerance of each other's issues.
I think it's also,
Raj, I'd like to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
also, I think it's important to realize that the environment and the exterior that we live with has an extraordinary impulse on the strength of the diseases that are around. One that is really important is COVID. We weren't even aware of COVID being a real issue, but in the topic that we're sort of skirting around a little bit is that COVID has an enormous propensity to complicate asthma care because it affects respiratory tract, and more importantly, it affects the brain. And if you don't have brain function that's not bad, you can't follow instructions so well. So there's a duality there where you get an exterior environmental trigger and the interior inability to follow the triggers and follow our instructions. Now it doesn't really make much difference because we're not seeing patients, but I can tell you that if you follow the medical instructions that these patients are given, they do well. I'm fearful that without that input, the patients won't do as well. And so I applaud the effort that's going into this educational program, because after all, our two works is also educational, but it was very localized, and we tried to sort of spread it around a bit, but it wasn't enough that would make a huge difference. But in our own patients, we saw a huge difference.
Raj, is it your experience that, excuse me, that there are causes for dementia? Do they know anything about that? Excuse me, is it hypoxia? Is it COVID? I mean, is there any light shed on why people are now leaning into dementia as in greater and greater numbers, other than there's the baby boom that's aging?
There are quite a few different causes that can lead to the diagnoses of dementia. We have age is your biggest risk factor. Technically, it's 58%. 7% is genetics. And then we have other risk factors such as hearing loss, social isolation, obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes. So everything that Joanna and Dr. Mandel were talking about and speaking and touching on having a good, healthy lifestyle and exercise, it all plays very key roles into reducing your risk factors of developing dementia over time. Although there are lots of risk factors, dementia is a little bit of a wild card where it can occur without any causes. So you can do everything right and follow the perfect regime and still end up with dementia, or you could live completely on the wild side and be 104 and be perfectly fine. And in the 10 years that I've been in working with the day programs, I've seen both extremes. I've seen my youngest client with a dementia diagnosis at 35, and our oldest client was 104 and did not have a dementia diagnosis at all.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a
Well,
reason, of course.
yeah.
The genetics plays a huge role in the acquisition of viruses, particularly COVID. And
Yes.
the issue with COVID affecting many organs, but the major two are respiratory and cerebral. And that's not well recognized. I'm delighted because the issue of the penetration of the virus is directly related to your genetics. So
Mhm.
depending on what your genetics are, you'll get a different outcome and a different application. So I agree with you 100%. And that's why you have to be really on guard. When you have an elderly patient, it's very important. I don't have to say this to you, but it's very important that they're recognized as being much more susceptible to the virus. The virus gets in more quickly, gets into a position where you get this long COVID issue, and then you really have to watch them very carefully.
Mhm.
So, Joanna, is it your experience that have you noticed that as this population is aging, there doesn't seem to be an infrastructure to catch it? You've got people like Brella who are working on a song and a prayer and what grants they can pull together, but the country, the government, the people who are most concerned with this crisis as it's coming, don't have an infrastructure. In your case, you're an RN and you can look after Michael as he ages. Most people don't have that, and there's nothing in place. What's your sense of what needs to be in place if this crisis is to be mitigated in any way?
Well, I think what you're doing, Michael, is one of the ways you can get the message out. I think people, they just ignore these subtle changes that are happening and they wait till, it's major, like they're walking out on the street and they don't know where they're going. We don't want that. So I think just raising awareness, talking about it like you're doing, just get the message out that people need to be aware that these subtle changes are happening and ways to deal with it. I mean, we haven't even touched on the fact, and of course, Michael could go on for another 3 hours about it, but pollution has something to do with dementia as well. So, we're getting into environmental issues now, but we just have to start talking about it, take the stigma away, and make it a more open conversation.
It's really very important, I think, to have a nurse like Joanna. We had a cohort of nurses, but that's not enough. It seems to be a huge step. It is, but it's not enough. And unless patients get in their hands instructions that are simply put like a light 1, 2, 3, 4, red, green, whatever you want, but they have to have identifiable triggers. And just getting a bit of a cold, they'll say, oh, I just shrug it off. That's critical because these things are viral. They're not necessarily COVID, but there are all sorts of viruses that can trigger asthma. But what's really important, we've now begun, I should say now begun, I have to read the literature to stay up, but the issue of mental retardation, I don't mean sort of mental lack of response, I guess, even though they have it written in front of them, they are not able to necessarily understand what was understood 6 months ago. And so they have to be followed up, not just for the disease, but for the understandability that they know how to handle the disease. And that sometimes has to be rewritten over and over again. And that way you can keep them out of trouble, at least most of the time, not all the time, because the COVID, of course, is a critically nefarious virus. And even though the Chinese, I think, want to stop it, it's vicious when it gets into the brain.
You know, Michael, I
So-
wonder if we could do that with this. Perhaps the dementia could have some basic signs. Are you forgetting, number one, are you forgetting your telephone number? Are you forgetting, how to get into your bank account? Some very basic early signs, and get that out to the people. They would then have the flags. Those red flags would be going out to the population. Oh, I didn't know that was part of it. Something non-threatening, but just subtle, step-by-step things that people could look for the red flags. I'm starting to get that dementia.
And that's actually exactly what we're working on with the I'm Still Me project and the
excellent.
community of practice. So we're working with the White Rock Division of Family Practice and Doctors, working on something called a decision tree almost. So it's, you have dementia, now what? So
Mhm.
there's 3 different spokes, the 3 different routes that you can take, as whether you're a caregiver, a person diagnosed with dementia, or if you're just looking for more information as a professional. So
Okay.
that's something that we're currently working on. Hopefully we can roll it out by the end of this year, but that's where we need the grants and the fundraising to come into. Our project unfortunately ends in March, end of March, we're done, but this is something that we really want to keep going.
Absolutely.
Tell me,
Critical.
do you envisage, Raj, that there is no infrastructure or catch basin for all of these folks who are now suffering from dementia or persons with it? Have you heard anything from that the government or anyone is concerned that this crisis has no particular way to solve it, way to deal with it, way to mitigate it in some way?
Unfortunately, it's not preventable and there's no cure at the moment. So there's no magic pill that we can take, but there are certain things that can be done. Exercise is one, medications is another. The medications aren't necessarily for the dementia diagnoses itself. It's more so for the brain fog and the side effects that come with it. And then there's also things such as lifestyle. So, changing certain things in lifestyle, your external factors, keeping those in check, your stressors, finding your triggers. So there's certain things that can be done, but unfortunately there's no cure and it's not really preventable either. The government
But
is working on a dementia strategic fund, or it's a dementia strategic strategy, which actually comes to an end in, I believe it's the end of this year in 2024. It was a 5-year plan and our project was actually funded through it.
Yeah. That's
so
right.
there's no place for all these folks who are showing up with dementia. There's no real plan for what's to happen. They're taken care of as best by their families. I guess if it gets too severe, they're institutionalized, but there's no real answer there for the millions of caregivers who really don't know where to turn as these loved ones are starting to decline.
Yeah,
That's right.
unfortunately, there is no real place. We are doing our very best as community members and being a community-based program and society. But, we're very limited. We're limited to grants, we're limited to fundraising. As much as we want to take everything that we're doing and learning and spread it across not only BC, but Canada, our hands are tied.
Yeah, I know that how that feels actually.
Yeah, you do. Very well.
The issues that we found very difficult when we were starting in the 70s and 80s is that to have patients accept the responsibility of their own care, but extremely importantly, they have to be said, you've got to take care of yourself, but we're here to support you, to help you to carry on. And I take it that's what's happening with you over there. But that's, I couldn't underline that more importantly. You can have all the skills you want. If the patients don't understand what you're saying or don't understand the instructions they're given,
Yeah.
the whole program will fall apart.
Exactly.
Is there any help in the rest of the world? Like, what are other countries doing? We can't be unique. Is there some other programs, or are we all sort of trying to figure this out all at the same time?
We're currently all trying to figure it out at the same time, roughly, but Australia is miles ahead of where Canada is. They have the Australia Awareness or Dementia Awareness Initiative, which goes across all of Australia. They have counselors that are available via phone call. They have a hotline, a 1-800 number that you can call, get in contact with people and resources that are available within your region and your area. And within 48 hours, somebody will call you back. So this is something that Canada is trying to mimic, but we're slowly getting there. We're not there yet, but we're slowly getting there.
Well, I'm
Is
delighted to hear that.
is money the barrier?
Money is the biggest barrier.
Okay, so we have to convince the government that it's worth investing in this. Because
Yes.
of course we're going to prevent hospitalizations, and that's a lot more expensive than a phone call.
Yes, exactly.
Well, yeah, it's not only, yeah, I agree with that, but I think the lifestyle that these patients who have early dementia, and they don't get any help because I think, well, I can forget a few things, or I miss this and miss that. And the signs of early dementia, it's not that they forget and wander around and can't recognize their home, they don't recognize their car, they don't recognize, that's way too late.
Yes.
Early
Exactly.
intervention is critical, particularly in asthma, because
Yes.
asthma will kill if it's allowed to continue.
Yeah. Early diagnoses in dementia is also extremely important because it delays the progress of the disease itself. It slows down the progression of it. There's things that can be done. You can live longer and a healthier lifestyle and
Right.
age safely in home for as long as possible.
Right. Oh, I agree with that.
Well,
So trying to get the early diagnoses is what we're aiming towards. But right now we're just kind of trying to catch everyone all together at the moment as they're kind of flying towards us. So it's, trying to play basketball and baseball all at the same time.
Yeah.
on the same court. All right. Well, I think in closing, I'll ask each of you to comment and then we'll close. This has been very informative. Dr. Mandel, in your time that asthma became runaway and there was nobody really dealing with it. And it parallels now where dementia is. And did anybody learn from your research, and was asthma able to be controlled and contained, or is it just wildly going out there and without anybody assisting it along the way? Did they learn anything from your research?
Well, it's very hard to say because I've been out of business now for 20 years. So I've not had a lot of hands-on, or I try to stay away from it because there's nothing worse than an old man thinks that he knows everything. And I don't, otherwise you don't get anywhere. But I think what I said in the initial few sentences, recognition of the problem is key. Recognition, number one, that they have a respiratory disease that takes some skills to control. But secondly, early dementia is often missed. It's often missed. And patients just continue on the road down to where their brains are. When they look at the post-mortem studies now, they see that the deposits are now worse than they used to be, though people didn't do a lot of post-mortem examinations of brains if that didn't seem to be necessary. But the ones that have been done in research have shown the brain is now much more affected by COVID, for example. That virus once again comes up, but it's other viruses that do it. And so early recognition of both diseases is critical. And obviously, I hear that money is the big thing, and it was our time. We had to start our own program, pay for all the stuff that we did ourselves. the government wouldn't help us at all. Even though we tried to get help. But it's the same, if you want, same old story. Same old
Well,
story.
it's a parallel, really. Only it's
Yeah.
not asthma, now it's dementia. Joanna, in closing, your thoughts on what people who have loved ones. I mean, you can only turn away and pretend it isn't happening for so long. Any advice for them?
I think they have to go by their gut feeling. If they think, okay, there's something not right here, I am not able to do what I used to do, go get help. It may take 6 months to see a neurologist to get it diagnosed, but okay, you're in the pipeline. But don't sit at home and just, be a mushroom. Go and get that help. Start the process of diagnosis. I just wanted to say one thing about the asthma. I am worried because we had a child die this summer over asthma and the smoke. So
Yeah.
the message that we were giving out isn't reaching everyone. Something is still wrong with that system. I'm sorry, it bothers me terribly that I personally can't do much about it anymore. But anyway, for dementia, I urge people, if you don't think you're functioning at the level you are, or you've had relatives saying you're not quite like you used to be, go get help, go get diagnosed, and go and see somebody. And perhaps this process that we're just talking about in Surrey might be the avenue for help.
All right. Raj, we're going to close with you. All of this really is preaching to the choir. You're in agreement that early is good when it comes to, if you're feeling that things aren't right, go get it checked out. You concur with that?
100%. Early is needed. The earlier we're able to do the diagnoses, the earlier we're able to start the interventions, the longer we can help the individuals thrive and survive. We can continue to focus on their strengths. We can continue to keep them cognitively stimulated, physically active, keep their progression at bay for as long as possible. And that is what is needed.
Yeah.
All right. I want to thank you all. Any last words before we go? This has been informative. I appreciate this. May be not your best day, doctor, but you're better on most days than people on their best days. So any last remarks?
Well, the one thing that I really became very interested in 25 years ago, 30 years ago, was air pollution. And I don't mean air pollution where you see the smokestacks bellowing out, but the air pollution, which the city here actually is now getting onto it. But critically important are small particles in the air which are emitted from various malfunctioning machinery, cars, buses, taxis, the whole thing. And so small airways disease is not picked up early unless you have some red flags waving. And that's critical to get on it. And we've all heard, early diagnosis, early intervention is critical. That's why he wrote out It Works. It sort of pushed it under there in a pamphlet. And I'm delighted to hear what's going on now.
All right, Joanna, any last words?
I think we've covered a lot in various branches of this topic. So it is very exciting, and I'm looking forward to hear what this group comes up with in Surrey, and I'm delighted to hear that service is available, and it would be nice to have what Australia had. Yes, thank you.
Aussie leading the way, as always. Well, thanks for being on the show. It was wonderful for you to take the time. Raj, any closing remarks?
I'll close as I usually do. Remember that it's very important to remain optimistic, hopeful, and positive in everything that we're doing, and continue to love and be patient.
Amen to that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being on. This has been just terrific. And a lot of people are going to see this and they're going to feel some hope and promise. So thank you all.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for doing it.
Until next time. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
This was the Brella Community Services Society podcast with Michael Morgan and Raj Sahota. For more information, go to our website at www.brellasociety.ca.